Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting from the ancestral lands of the Tapilan Cuatlitacan Nation, the original carekeepers of this territory, now known as San Antonio. Buenas tardes. I am Marisela Barrera, a working-class Tejana writer and performer born from mixed-status immigrants in the Rio Grande Valley. Welcome to a conversation between Martín Espada and Luis Alberto Urrea. Thank you for engaging in virtual storytelling circles with the San Antonio Book Festival. Martín Espada is a vital voice in American poetry, a poet who, quote, stirs us into an undeniable social consciousness. So says Richard Blanco. Espada's new poetry collection, Floaters, offers songs of protest, songs of love. Floaters takes its title from a term used by certain Border Patrol agents to describe migrants who drown trying to cross over. You must read this collection. It is now. It is urgent, essential. The direct link to purchase books in the event is on the event page on the festival website. Espada has published more than 20 books as a poet, editor, essayist, and translator. Born in Brooklyn, he has gathered chingos de awards, including, and I need to take a breath for this, the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Shelley Memorial Award, the Robert Creeley Award, the National Hispanic Cultural Center Literary Award, an American Book Award, an Academy of American Poets Fellowship, and a Guggenheim Fellowship, among others. The Republic of Poetry was a finalist for the pinche Pulitzer Prize, gente. Ta-da! His book of essays and poems, Zapata's Disciple, was banned in Tucson as part of the Mexican American Studies program outlawed by the state of Arizona and reissued by Northwestern. A former tenant lawyer, Espada is a professor of English at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. And Espada will be in conversation today with Luis Alberto Urrea, a finalist for the, say it with me, pinche Pulitzer Prize, for their landmark work of nonfiction, The Devil's Highway. Urrea is also the best-selling author of the novels The Hummingbird's Daughter, Into the Beautiful North, and Queen of America, as well as the story collection The Water Museum, a Faulkner Award finalist. Born in Tijuana to a Mexicano father and a Americana mother, he lives outside of Chicago and teaches at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We are virtual together in the same space with these phenomenal keepers of the story. Send in your questions via the chat box and get yourself a copy of their books. Let's welcome Martín and Luis.
Pues Martín, finally, man. We were victims of techno gremlins trying to hook up across the world, pero aquí estamos, mano.
Aquí estamos y no nos vamos.
No, ahora ya no.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. Many thanks to Marisela Barrera and to my compañero, old friend, Luis Alberto Urrea. Thanks too to my wife, Lauren, for being present behind the scenes and also on every single page of this book. I'll read 3 poems.
Yeah.
Then turn to Luis for conversation and then your questions. I want to begin with the title poem for reasons that should be obvious. 2 Salvadoran migrants, father and daughter, who came to be known as Oscar and Valeria, drowned crossing the Rio Grande in June of 2019. Photograph of their bodies, as you might remember, went viral, sparking outrage and grief and trutherism. A post in the I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group charged that the photo was a fake. This poem speaks to that photograph and to these charges. Floaters takes its title from the term used by certain members of the Border Patrol to describe those who drown crossing over. So we begin here with floaters. Epigraph. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask, have y'all ever seen floaters this clean? I'm not trying to be an ass, but I have never seen floaters like this. Could this be another edited photo? We've all seen the Dems and liberal parties do some pretty sick things. Anonymous post. I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group. Like a beer bottle thrown into the river by a boy too drunk to cry. Like the shard of a styrofoam cup drained of coffee brown as the river. Like the plank of a fishing boat broken in half by the river, the dead float. And the dead have a name. Floaters, say the men of the Border Patrol, keeping watch all night by the river, hearts pumping coffee as they say the word floaters, soft as a bubble, hard as a shoe, as it nudges the body to see if it breathes, to see if it moans, to see if it sits up and speaks. And the dead have names. A feast day parade of names. Names that dress all in red, names that twirl skirts, names that blow whistles, names that shake rattles, names that sing in praise of the saints. Say, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say, Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. See how they rise off the tongue, a calling of bird to bird somewhere in the trees above our heads, trilling in the dark heart of the leaves. Say what we know of them, now they are dead. Oscar slapped dough for pizza with oven-blistered fingers. Daughter Valeria sang, banging a toy guitar. He slipped free of the apron he wore on the blast of the oven, sold the motorcycle he would kick till it sputtered to life, counted off pesos for the journey across the river, and the last of his 25 years, and the last of her 23 months. There is another name that beats its wings in the heart of the trees. Say, Tanya Vanessa Avalos, Oscar's wife and Valeria's mother, the witness stumbling along the river. Now their names rise off her tongue. Say, Oscar y Valeria. He swam from Matamoros across to Brownsville. The girl slung around his neck stood her in the weeds on the Texas side of the river, swore to return with her mother in hand, turning his back as fathers do, who later say, I turned around and she was gone. In the time it takes for a bird to hop from branch to branch, Valeria jumped in the river after her father. Maybe he called out her name as he swept her up from the river. Maybe the river drowned out his voice as the water swept them away. Tanya called out the names of the saints, but the saints drowsed in the stupor of birds in the dark, their cages covered with blankets. The men on patrol would never hear their pleas for asylum, watching for floaters, hearts pumping coffee all night on the Texas side of the river. No one, they say, had ever seen floaters this clean. Oscar's black shirt yanked up to the armpits, Valeria's arms slung around her father's neck, even after the light left her eyes, both face down in the weeds back on the Mexican side of the river. Another edited photo. See how her head disappears in his shirt, the waterlogged diaper bunched in her pants, the blue of the blue cans. The radio warned us about the crisis actors we see at one school shooting after another. The man called, Oscar will breathe, sit up, speak, tug the black shirt over his head, shower off the mud, and shake hands with the photographer. Yet, The floaters did not float down the Rio Grande like Olympians showing off the backstroke, nor did their souls float up to Dallas, land of rumored jobs and a president shot in the head as he waved from his motorcade. No bubbles rose from their breath in the mud, light as the iridescent circles of soap that would fascinate a 2-year-old. And the dead still had names. Names that sing in praise of the saints, names that flower in blossoms of white, a cortege of names dressed all in black, trailing the coffins to the cemetery. Carve their names in headlines and gravestones they would never know in the kitchens of this cacophonous world. Enter their names in the book of names. Say Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. Buried them in a corner of the cemetery named for the sainted Archbishop of the Poor, shot in the heart saying Mass, bullets bought by the taxes I paid when I worked as a bouncer and fractured my hand 40 years ago, and bumper stickers read, El Salvador is Spanish from Vietnam. When the last bubble of breath escapes the body, may the men who speak of floaters, who have never seen floaters this clean, float through the clouds to the heavens, where they paddle the air as they wait for the saint who flips through the keys in his ring like a drowsy janitor, till he fingers the key that turns the lock and shuts the gate on their babble-tongued faces, and they plunge back to earth, a shower of hailstones pelting the river, the Mexican side of the river.
Bravo.
Gracias. Well, as you know, times of hate call for poems of love. My wife, Lauren, is a poet, a novelist, and a committed high school teacher. She taught for many years in urban education, including a place called Springfield, Massachusetts. She would leave in the dark and come home in the dark. And Aubade is a French verse form about the parting of lovers at dawn. And did we ever? Aubade with concussion. Epigraph. Poverty is black ice. Naomi Ayala. You leave me, sleeping in the dark. You kiss me, and I stir, fingers in your hair, eyes open, unseeing. You leave me asleep every morning, commuting to the school in the city at sunrise. The landlord's driveway, a muddy creek, ices over hard after the freezing rain clatters all night. Your feet lie up, your head slamming the ground, an eclipse of the sun flooding your eyes. You sleep under the car. No one knows how long you sleep. You awake with 100 ice picks stabbing your eardrums. You awake, coat and hair soaked, and somehow drive to school. You remember to turn left at the Smith & Wesson factory. The other teachers lead you by the elbow to Mercy Hospital, where you pause when the nurse asks your name, where you claim your pain level is a 4, and they slide you into the white coffin of an MRI machine. You hold your breath. They film your brain. Concussion. The word we use for the boxer plunging face first to the canvas after the uppercut blindsided him, not the teacher commuting to school at sunrise in a Subaru Crosstrek. Yet you would drive, ears hammering as they hammer in the purgatory of the MRI. A week before, Isabella came to you in the classroom and said, Miss, I cannot sleep. 3 days. I cannot sleep. Her boyfriend called at 2 a.m. and she did not pick up. At 3 a.m., a single shot to the head put him to sleep, and he will sleep forever. His body hidden beneath a car in a parking lot on Maple Street. The cops, the television cameras, the neighbors, all gathering at the yellow tape carnival of his corpse. You said to Isabella, take this journal, write it down. You don't have to show me. You don't have to show anyone. On the cover of the journal you bought at the drugstore was the word dream. Isabella sat there in your classroom at your desk, pencil waving in furious circles. By lunchtime, as her friends slapped each other, Isabella slept, head on the desk, face pressed against the pages of the journal. This is why I watch you sleep at 3 a.m., when the sleeping pills fail to quell the strike beating in my brain. This is why I say to you when you kiss me in my sleep, don't go. Don't go. You have to go.
Awesome, man. You know, I could sit here and listen to you read all day, brother. This is a very easy job for me. You know, like, go, Martin, go.
Okay, well, I'm not going to make it that easy for you. I'm going to read one more.
Okay.
And then we will talk. I'm moving my lamp as we speak. My father is a central figure in my work. Francisco Luis Espada, Frank Espada, was born in Utuado, Puerto Rico, the mountains, in the year 1930. Died in Pacifica, California in 2014. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in the fall of 2017, I saw Utuado over and over again on TV, on the internet, in the headlines. As John Lee Anderson put it in the New Yorker, Utuado had become, quote, a byword for the island's devastation. At least 3,000 died in Puerto Rico, according to one study. Some say 4,000. I started talking to my father, who died 3 years before. Actually, I started talking to his ashes in a box. And that was the genesis of the last poem I'll read this afternoon. Letter to my father, October 2017. You once said, my reward for this life will be 1,000 pounds of dirt shoveled in my face. You were wrong. You are 7 pounds of ashes in a box, a Puerto Rican flag wrapped around you next to a red brick from the house in Utuado where you were born, all crammed together on my bookshelf. You taught me there is no God, no life after this life, so I know you are not watching me type this letter over my shoulder. When I was a boy, you were God. I watched from the 7th floor of the projects as you walked down into the street to stop a public execution. A big man caught a small man stealing his car, and everyone in Brooklyn heard the car alarm wail of the condemned, "He's killing me!" At a word from you, the executioner's hand slipped from the hair of the thief. The kid was high, was all you said when you came back to us. When I was a boy, and you were God, we flew to Puerto Rico. You said, my grandfather was the mayor of Utuado. His name was Buenaventura. That means good fortune. I believed in your grandfather's name. I heard the tree frogs chanting to each other all night. I saw a banana leaf and elephant palm sprouting from the mountain's belly. I gnawed the mango's pit, and the sweet yellow hair stuck between my teeth. I said to you, you came from another planet. How'd you do it? You said, every morning, just before I woke up, I saw the mountains. Every morning, I see the mountains. And Utuado, 3 sisters, all in their 70s, all bedridden, all Pentecostales who only left the house for church, lay sleeping on mattresses spread across the floor when the hurricane gutted the mountain the way a butcher slices open a dangled pig, and a rolling wall of mud buried them, leaving the 4th sister to stagger into the street, screaming like an unheeded prophet about the end of the world. A Utuado man who cultivated a garden of aguacate and carambola, feeding the avocado and star fruit to his nieces from New York, so the trees in his garden beheaded all at once like the soldiers of a beaten army, and so hanged himself. A Utuado, a welder, and a handyman rigged a pulley with a shopping cart to ferry rice and beans across the river where the bridge collapsed, witnessed the cart swaying above so many hands that raised a sign that told the helicopters, Campamento Los Olvidados, Camp of the Forgotten. Los Olvidados? Wait, 7 hours in line for a government meal with Skittles and Vienna sausage, or a tart to cover the bones of a house with no roof as the fungus grows on their skin from sleeping on mattresses drenched with the spit of the hurricane. They drink the brown water, waiting for microscopic monsters in their bellies to visit plagues upon them. A nurse says, "These people are going to have an epidemic. These people are going to die." The president flips rolls of paper towels to a crowd at a church in Guaynabo, Zeus lobbing thunderbolts on the locked ward of his delusions. Down the block, cousin Ricardo, Bernice's boy, says that somebody stole his can of diesel. I heard somebody ask you once if Puerto Rico needed to be free, and you said, 3 pulgadas de sangre en la calle. 3 inches of blood in the street. Now, 3 inches of mud flow through the streets of Utuado, and troops patrol the town as if guarding the vein of copper in the ground, as if a shovel digging graves in the backyard might strike the ore below, as if La Brigada swinging machetes to clear the road might remember the last uprising. I know you are not God. I have the proof. 7 pounds of ashes in a box on my bookshelf. Gods do not die. And yet, I want you to be God again. Stride from the crowd to seize the president's arm before another roll of paper towels sails away. Thunder Spanish obscenities in his face. Banish him to a roofless rainstorm in Utuado so he unravels one soaked sheet after another till there is nothing left but his cardboard heart. I promised myself I would stop talking to you. White box of gray grit. You were deaf even before you died. Hear my promise now. I will take you to the mountains where houses lost like ships at sea rise blue and yellow from the mud. I will open my hands. I will scatter your ashes. En Utuado.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. That's so cool, man. Well, yeah. So because of our computer demon glitches, we started late. We're going to get to go over a little bit, but we don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm going to toss one at you. You know, I've been your fan since Immigrant Ice Boys Bolero, but I want to recall a scene to you. I'm sure you'll remember. I think it was late '82 or early '83, Boston, and we were having this literary café. You, Tino Villanueva, Jimmy Santiago Baca, and me. And it felt portentous then, but I had no idea what was ahead of us. But I had just come to Cambridge, Boston, from working in Tijuana with the poor, the unrepresented, the undocumented, and you were working, doing your work in Chelsea. And I felt a kinship with you and a unity of vision. And I just want to throw this at you because I thought you'd appreciate it. Before you arrived, Tino said, Oye, Martín, he's the most famous, not yet known poet in America. And I said, how can you say that? And he said, because he will be. He will be the most. And I was just astounded, man. And I throw you back to those days. What was that like? Did you know? I mean, you were driven. I felt you had the fire in you that you were never going to stop, and you never did. So, kudos, man.
So the question, was I driven?
Yeah. Did you have that? Did you have this? Did you have a sense of destiny calling? It felt that way to me with you. This poetry seemed to be, ardiendo.
I knew that it was poetry was burning a hole in my pocket. If poetry was burning inside me, I knew I wasn't going to stop. I had no idea where that was going to take me.
Yeah.
Mind you, when you met me, I was, as you point out, not in the academy at all. I was working at that point in law school. When you met me, I was still at Northeastern University School of Law in Boston, where I graduated in 1985. And I actually go on to become supervisor of a program called Subclínica Legal, a legal services program for low-income Spanish-speaking tenants in Chelsea, which is right across the Tobin Bridge from Boston. And that was typical of the sort of legal work I did. I was a tenant lawyer. I also did work in bilingual education law. I was a lawyer activist. And so that was my world. That was my universe. I didn't know anything about what was out there in the world of poetry. I didn't know anything about awards. I didn't know anything about grants. I didn't know anything about jobs. And I didn't care. That's not what was driving me. And it wasn't the idea of fame that was driving me either. I wasn't, I was destined to be one of those people who couldn't shut the hell up.
Yes.
And it didn't matter what the forum was, whether it was a courtroom or whether it was a demonstration or whether it was a poetry reading somewhere. And it so happened that poetry won out over everything else I was doing. I used to tell people as a joke, well, if, the law doesn't work out, I always have poetry to fall back on. And strangely enough, precisely because I was a legal services lawyer, I wasn't paid very much. Yeah. And it wasn't long before I started making more money as a lawyer than as a poet. As a poet, I was making more money as a poet than as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And it was never about a sense of destiny. It was a sense of compulsion, sense of commitment. That was driving me. Poetry was just the language I found to express it.
I love it. I felt a kinship with you. And it was an interesting moment because I think I felt the same way. I didn't know what else to do except write. And I was trying a lot of things, weird twist of fate that I was there to teach expos at Harvard. How'd that happen? I don't know. But, I felt a strong connection to you because I think we had the thing that we had to do. But remember this, which I think is really interesting too. Jimmy Baca had just started publishing Martín and Meditations in the South Valley through Tino's Chicano Poetry Journal. So there were these levels, like Tino was sort of the prophet, and Jimmy was launching. And I felt like we were sort of kids coming out of the woods or something with this backpack full of words. It was a great moment. And it's been so touching and moving to watch you go through. And I just want to say, you see, I put it up here. Promo. This book is astounding. Your books are all amazing, but like I told you, I wrote you earlier and I said, it's like you're in a basketball game just sinking 3-pointers over and over. Every page when I get to it, I think, wow, Martin. And, you know, my other, I've got it over here, subliminal advertising, but, you know, I start my semesters with poems from this book. But I'm going to go to Floaters. In fact, I'll probably Monday share a few of those poems with my Latinx literature course. So I've got to thank you for the work and the presence and the vision. You're tireless, man. You know, tireless.
Well, for somebody who's tireless, I'm pretty damn tired.
Well, me too.
But you know, I mean, it goes both ways. As you know, I am a great admirer of your work, and there are people who may not be aware of this. I mean, they're aware of your fiction and they're aware of your nonfiction. I wonder how many people are aware of your poetry. I wonder how many people are aware of a long poem called Vatos, which you published with photographs by Jose Galvez.
Yes.
And small, beautiful book that made me cry.
Well, thank you.
And that influenced me. We were talking about influences and so on and so forth, and in our email exchanges, and that certainly influenced me, because I looked at that and said, "Wow, I wish I could write that poem."
Wow.
You know, and of course, my father was a documentary photographer, Frank Espada,
Yes.
Puerto Rican Diaspora Documentary Project, and that is, in fact, who contributed the cover for this book, as he has contributed the cover for at least 10 of my books.
Yes.
And I always wanted to do with my father what you did with Jose Galvez. I never got that opportunity. You know, it's
Wow.
it's an expensive proposition, photography, to publish photography.
Oh, that would be a stunning book, though. You know, it was funny, that poem, I read it in Tucson. And Jose, I didn't know him, I knew of him, but he came up to me and he said, I have this book of photos of Vatos, and I want to use the poem as the text. Can I do that? And I thought, this is so cool, you know. So it was serendipity. But yeah, it's 2:14. Cindy's here, my wife's here, doing the button pushing for me.
We have 2:45 in a half hour.
And we have till 2:25.
Yeah.
20.
We got
So, we have some time. Maybe we should see if we can get to some questions, eh?
Yeah. No, we got a stay of execution from the governor.
A little bit of a, yeah, but we're up against hard time break, folks, because the next event is going to come. So Cindy's looking
There's no
down.
question.
Oh, good. Well, if you have questions for Martin, send them to us, and I'll ask them for you, so we can keep chatting.
Yeah. No, listen, pop me another question out there, or observation, whatever.
Oh, Vatos just came up on the chat board.
There you go. That's great. You know, that's influence. When people talk about influence, we don't have to talk about the great dead poets. We can talk about our contemporaries also.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we can talk about Luis or Tino or Jimmy Santiago Vaca's book, What's Happening, was also a book that had a big impact on me. Or the Puerto Rican poet Jack Agüeros, who was a second father to me. There's an elegy called Flan in this book, Floaters, for Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are influences, because they're flesh and blood poets. The word made flesh. This is the way you find out, in essence, I can do this too. You know?
Yeah. I remember you turning me on to Clemente Soto Vélez. We have a question.
Right.
For someone who would like to, this is from Virginia Sandoval. For someone who would like to begin writing, starting with poetry or poems, where do they begin? Órale pues, maestro. Where do you begin?
Where did I begin?
Where should a poet begin?
Where to begin? Well, there are so many places to begin. I think it's very important to begin by reading. I think you got to read a lot of poems. I would never, I wouldn't write a novel without reading a bunch of novels. So I think it begins there. Now, you don't have to read the the poems that everybody else approves of. You don't have to read the canon. You don't have to read the mainstream. If someone tells you have to read Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot, run in the other direction. But you read what speaks to you.
Oh yeah.
Right? You read or you hear it, as in this session today, and then you begin there. And then you try to find your own voice. And it could begin with journaling. It could start in that way. I know that workshops are popular as an option. I believe that writing poetry is essentially a solitary occupation. You're going to have to figure this out for yourself. And I say that as somebody who profits from workshops. I get paid to do workshops. And I'm not saying, I'm saying you got to have a voice once you step into that space, and then I help you to continue finding that voice. You have to write about things that matter to you. If it doesn't matter to you, it's not going to matter to anybody else. So that's another thing that to consider at the beginning of the process. You have to write about that which moves you the most, keeping in mind that people crave meaning in this culture, and you're going to be called upon to help them do that. Find the meaning.
There was another question. I'm Cindy looking for it. You were asked, how does your work as a lawyer inform your poetry?
Well, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. I haven't practiced in many years. I am a professor of English at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, but I still have my license. And you trained a certain way. You train to think a certain way as a lawyer. It never leaves you. Even if you want it to go away, it doesn't go away. The biggest imprint on me as a poet is simply this: advocacy.
Yes.
I was an advocate as a lawyer, speaking on behalf of those without an opportunity to be heard. And I continue in that advocacy as a poet. In fact, often speaking for the same communities. When I was working for Su Clinica, this is between 1987 and 1993, many of my clients came from Central America. They found their way all the way to Boston, all the way to Chelsea. And they were escaping from El Salvador or Guatemala from the wars generated by the Reagan administration. And lo and behold, they became my clients. And so now, if I write a poem for Oscar y Valeria, Salvadoran migrants, they are reminiscent for me of the people I represented 30 years ago.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, again, I would direct people to this astounding book too. I think there's some of that there. Susana has two questions for you, Estimado Martín. One, how did you pick the poets/poems included in What Saves Us? But two, and I think very interesting, how does the audience learn about upcoming public workshops that you are giving? People would like to come.
Okay. Well, I did edit an anthology called What Saves Us? Poems of Empathy and Outrage in the Age of Trump. It was published by Northwestern University Press in 2019. How did I choose them? It was pandemonium. I put out a call. I would have included a hell of a lot more poets, but for the fact I was informed quite reasonably by the publisher that they couldn't publish a book that big. That if I created a 400-page anthology, they couldn't sell it. They had a hard enough time selling the one I came up with. So it was, they cut me off. I mean, I wanted to keep inviting people, getting more and more poems, and they said, "Basta ya, you're done." So it was very much, editing an anthology now is not the way it used to be. In the old days, what I used to do is go to my favorite books, pull out the poems, and say, "This is what I want to put in my anthology."
Right.
I would have had vatos in there. Now, do you know what happens? Permissions. And if you don't have a permissions budget, and my permissions budget for that anthology was 0, then you are on a completely different plane, and you're making do with previously unpublished work and the people who will respond in a timely fashion to your email entreaties. So it's a very, very different process. I'm not sure I would do it again. As for the other question, your favorite Latinx poetry for younger readers. I don't know if you remember this, Luis, but there was an anthology that, I don't know. There was so many anthologies, first of all, so many poetry anthologies produced by Ray Gonzalez. You could pick up any one of those. But I remember one called Cool Salsa that was specifically edited by Lori Carlson, who was married to Oscar Hijuelos, specifically geared to younger readers. And it was bilingual, which I think is important. So the poems written in English were translated into Spanish, poems in Spanish translated into English. We should never forget this is a bilingual literature.
Exactly. Oh yeah. We have 2 minutes left. Where can people sign up for your workshops?
Well, if you go to my website, which is www.martinespada.net, you'll see where there are upcoming virtual readings and workshops in the spring, and now we're starting to see it, sort of book out into the summer. I post the information as I get it. Some of it's incomplete, but keep checking back. That's where you'll find it.
Beautiful. I want to thank you. This was awesome. It's so great for me to be able to talk to you, albeit electronically again. I love the stuff. I love this book. And I'm so happy that we got to, chat with some of these folks and answer some questions. There are more coming in, but because we're up against the death clock now, we probably should sign off. So gracias, Martín.
Gracias, Luis. Thank you so much. It means the world to me that you think so highly of this book. It really does.
I love it. I love it to death. All right, brother. I will see you around the next bend, eh?
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and thank you, San Antonio. Thank you, Book Festival. Everybody who did this made it possible. Go to the bookstore, buy Martín's book. In fact, buy all of those books. See you next time. Hasta luego, hermano.